Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Hard Answers. I'm Tom Graham. Today I'm going to discuss sexual preference and gender identity. The reason they'll be discussed together is because these two incredibly different topics are often bundled together, and many of the same issues come up when dealing with these two topics. Are they a product of genetics, or are they a product of environment? Are they nature, or are they nurture? Are these people defective, and should we attempt to fix or treat them? Church groups trying to pray the gay away versus transgenders getting surgery to align their physical appearance with their gender identity. Is outside the range of stereotypical necessarily bad? Should any people be discriminated against for factors beyond their control? And should society try to prevent such discrimination? For this video to be effective, it is important that we define terms that will be used in this video. Sex, the reproductive attributes of an entity. The presence of sex-determining region Y protein in your DNA determines that you are male. The absence determines that you are female. In humans, there are two sexes, male and female. Sexual development disorders such as pseudohermaphroditism, androgen insensitivity syndrome, intersex, multi-X chromosome disorders, mosaicism due to mutated cell division, and the absorption of a fraternal twin of the opposite sex are all very real disorders, but they are not alternative sexes. Man, an adult human male. Woman, an adult human female. Gender. From the Oxford Dictionary, the word gender has been used since the 14th century as a grammatical term referring to classes of nouns designated as masculine or feminine or neuter. In French, the word hair is masculine and chair is feminine. Neuter. Sexless. Masculine. Having qualities or appearance traditionally associated by society with men. Feminine. Having qualities or appearance traditionally associated by society with women. As you see, masculine and feminine are social stereotypes. They have no relevance in biology. Because 99.6% of the population identifies as being the same gender as society has associated with their sex, gender and sex seem to be tightly coupled genetically and only partially a social construct. But there is evidence that this may just be a correlation and not a causation. This actually strengthens the argument that social stereotypes have no biological relevance. Sex roles. Roles that can be performed exclusively by the person due to their sex. Providing an egg, carrying a developing baby, or nursing is a female sex role, while providing sperm is a male sex role. Gender roles. The role or behavior learned by a person as appropriate to their gender, determined by the prevailing cultural norms of society. These days, many men change diapers and feed babies and do housework, and many men work outside the home. Gender roles change based on societal preference. Very aggressive and hairy men still do dishes, and I don't think anyone would dare call them feminine. The newest incarnation of Wonder Woman shows a very feminine, compassionate, empathetic woman who just happens to be an extremely strong goddess and kicks evil's butt. I don't think anyone could honestly call Wonder Woman masculine, even though the gender roles of soldier and superhero have traditionally been a male stereotype. More and more gender roles are being dismantled and reorganized every day. Sexual orientation. What sex you are attracted to, regardless of non-sexual attributes. If you're attracted to the opposite sex, regardless of their non-sexual traits, you are heterosexual. If you are attracted to the same sex, regardless of their non-sexual traits, you are homosexual. Gays are homosexual men. Lesbians are homosexual women. 3.5% of the U.S. adult population identifies as at least partially homosexual, 1.8% as bisexual, 1.7% as strictly homosexual. Transgender. A person who feels that they are masculine in a female body, or a person who feels that they are feminine in a male body. The Center for Disease Control estimates that 0.4% of U.S. adults identify as transgender, about 1 in every 250 people. That's over 1 million people in the United States alone. Most transgender people simply live their lives, feeling the way they feel, but outwardly portraying, with clothing, hairstyle, makeup, etc., their genetic sex. Many transgender men are on hormone therapy, which shrinks testicles and produces breasts, while women's hormone therapy grows facial hair, promotes muscle growth, and creates a lower voice. 3,250 people had plastic surgery in 2016 to outwardly portray the sex they identify with. Even fewer had surgery modifying their genitalia. Transsexual. A person who has had cosmetic surgery to alter the appearance of their genitalia to conform with the gender that they identify with. The term transsexual is a misnomer because their sex stays the same, only their outward appearance has changed. Transgenders are not necessarily transsexual, but transsexuals are almost always transgender. Now that we have the definitions out of the way, let's talk about the brain. For the last 50 years, it was thought that your brain developed as either male or female, and that the development of such is under the very early control of steroid hormones. But we didn't find any strong evidence to back up that hypothesis. Then we started looking at MRIs to distinguish male from female brains. What we found out is that looking at an MRI simply shows us the likely disposition of the person. Amygdala size translates into aggressive, not whether the person is more male or female. From a biological, neurological, and physiological reference point, there is no such thing as a male or a female brain. Every human being's physical traits will fall somewhere within the spectrum of masculine or feminine. Every human being's dispositional traits will fall somewhere within the spectrum of masculine or feminine, and what society considers masculine or feminine is ever changing. Now, men and women have different body parts that may cause behavior that may seem like it's caused by different sex brains. Male eyes have more M cells, magnocellular, which can track objects in motion. Female eyes have more P cells, parvocellular, which differentiate between objects, colors, and textures. As a result of the male or female eyes their brains are connected to, given the choice of looking at a young woman's face or a mobile of moving objects, newborn males are twice as likely to prefer looking at moving objects, and females are more likely to look at the face. Male children like to draw action with very few colors. Female children like to draw objects with lots of colors and textures. So saying that these behaviors are caused by a male or female brain is like saying that a man shaves because he has a man brain, when in reality it's because he has hair growing out of his face. However, the auditory system does seem to develop differently in males versus females. Females, on average, have 11% more auditory neurons and males are better at ignoring repetitious and unwanted noise. But because these might be a function of the male ear nerves and the female ear nerves, this too might not indicate a male or female brain, just a male or female body. There are several controversial, completely debunked, yet wildly popular studies floating around. For instance, one suggests that in children, emotions are localized in the amygdala. This has few connections to the language and reasoning centers in the cerebral cortex. But in female brains only, during adolescence, negative emotion, brain activity, moves from the amygdala to the cerebral cortex. So talking to an adult male about his feelings is like talking to a 6-year-old child about their feelings. This study has been completely debunked and yet is still widely popular. As early as 2008, scientists have started looking at sex-biased gene expression in the brain. They hypothesized that some difference between the sexes might be partially explained by sexually dependent gene expression differences in the brain. They further speculated that if those differences existed and are functionally important, they may be conserved in the evolution of primates. To test these hypotheses, they measured gene expression in the brain of male and female primates from 3 species: humans, Homo sapiens, macaques, and marmosets. Their results point to a conserved signature of sexual gene expression dimorphism in the brains of primates. Interestingly, they found that genes with conserved sexual gene expression dimorphism in the brain also evolve under more evolutionary constraint, compared with other genes, suggesting that they may have important roles during evolution of sex in primates. Moreover, they found higher evolutionary constraints in the coding regions of female-biased genes as compared to both male-biased and non-sex-biased expressed genes. In 2009, a study was done with 3 female fetuses and 1 male fetus to check if sex-biased gene expression happened prenatally. Intriguingly, SRY, the well-known determinant of testicular development during mid-gestation, showed no evidence of expression in any of the brain regions analyzed, suggesting that the main somatic sex determinants may be different for the brain and gonads during human gestation, or it may be that only a small part of the Y chromosome is sex determining and the rest may be behavior determining and overriding of the default behavior we socially consider feminine. As of today, this kind of research is in its infancy, but it does open the door to the possibility of a male or female brain. This may explain how a brain in a female body has the same neurons that a brain in a male body has, but seems to use those neurons differently. It also might explain the impulse of certain female mammals to nurse infants that aren't their own, or the impulse of certain male mammals to kill infants that aren't their own. But of course, all of this is mere speculation. Plenty of female animals will kill orphan babies to reduce competition for their own babies. No genetic causal effect or behavior has been determined. Statistically speaking, men and women do have statistical differences in preference in certain areas, like career choices. Women tend to work in jobs that directly nurture people, like nursing, counseling, teaching. Men tend to not want to nurture. Instead, they want to work with things in engineering, construction, computer programming, etc. However, there are plenty of men who want to work with people and plenty of women who want to work with things. There's a lot of overlap. There simply exists a statistical preference. No individual should be profiled based on statistics. This probably indicates that the environment and society at large, or even hormones produced by sexual organs, have played a role to sway male and female preferences. This absolutely does not indicate a male or female brain. On a final note about the brain, a collection of cells in the hypothalamus called the central subdivision of the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, where the amygdala begins its descent into the hypothalamus, seems to be sexually dimorphic in humans. The average volume and number of neurons in this area is 44% and 77% respectively greater on average in men than in women. Transgender people seem to have the same volume and density on average as the sex that they identify with. The problem with the conclusions that many draw from this is that the sexual dimorphism in this part of the brain doesn't develop until early adulthood, and transgenders identify as the opposite sex in early childhood. Behavior and experience shape the brain anatomy, so it is impossible to say if the correlation is behavior and experience-based or genetic. Female bodybuilders aren't male no matter how much muscle they develop. The same might be said of this region of the brain. Now, on to the body and sex. Men can be beautiful, petite, and extremely feminine. Women can be handsome, rough, and extremely masculine. There are only two sexes. Your sex is determined at conception. The myth that we all start out female is just that, a myth. For the first several weeks after conception, the baby follows the same blueprint for development, regardless of whether it is male or female. It is only after the male fetus starts to produce testosterone that the sex characteristics begin to develop. The hormone begins to change the genetic activity of the cells that form the reproductive organs. By this time in development, the male fetus has fully developed mammary papillae, along with the same blood vessels and nerves as females. However, scientists have found no evidence that men ever nursed their young, meaning nipples are likely a feature of natural selection simply didn't remove. Feature that natural selection simply didn't remove. If you have testes determining factor, also known as sex determining region Y protein in your chromosomes, then you are male. If you don't, then you're female. Yes, there are more pairs of chromosomes than XX and XY. In fact, there are 6 different pairs that don't result in infant death. Then there are weird circumstances where a twin absorbs the other and has both male and female DNA. But that is extremely rare. In other instances, a cell DNA mutates and the mutation survives replication, meaning a person has 2 sets of unique DNA. Then there are intersex, pseudo-hermaphrodite people. Most of the time, but not always, they are born with a large phallus, but during puberty develop breasts, menstruate, and only in very, very rare cases are able to produce sperm. Then there are androgen insensitivity syndrome people, where a person who is genetically male is resistant to male hormones called androgens. As a result, the person has some or all the physical traits of a woman, but the genetic makeup of a man, complete with breasts and a vagina, typically sterile, with internal underdeveloped testes. Both pseudohermaphroditism and androgen insensitivity syndrome are disorders of sexual development. They are not alternative sexes. In 46XX intersex female pseudohermaphroditism, individuals have male external genitalia, but the chromosomal constitution and reproductive organs of a female. In 46XY male pseudohermaphroditism, individuals have ambiguous or female external genitalia, but the chromosomal constitution and reproductive organs of a male, though the testes may be malformed or absent. Sexual preference is the one area that most point to as proof that there must be a male and a female brain, because we're attracted to each other differently. But the fact of the matter is that a small gland in your brain, the pituitary gland, secretes the same hormone that acts on the adrenal glands, thyroid gland, ovaries, and testes, which in turn produce other hormones like estrogen and testosterone. Through production of its hormones, the pituitary gland controls metabolism, growth, sexual maturation, reproductive development, blood pressure, and many other vital physical functions and processes. It produces a specific kind of hormone, gonadotropin-releasing hormone, that activates the ovaries in a female to produce estrogen and progesterone, and activates the testes in a male to produce testosterone. It is the estrogen and testosterone that react with the rest of your body and with your brain to create reactions and behaviors and physical development. So the same brain can cause both male and female bodies to react differently by the pituitary gland producing the exact same hormone. Sexual preference is not proof of male and female brains. Heterosexuality simply means that you have matured to be more fit, evolutionarily speaking, to pass on genes to your offspring than a homosexual is. However, Studies on genetically identical twins have found that when a twin states they are gay, the other, over 80% of the time, is not gay. This would lead us to believe that being gay is not genetic. So we know you're not born gay, but we also know you're not born heterosexual. You may recognize that there is a difference between boys and girls, but sexual attraction hasn't been developed yet. If your development from conception to puberty is free from severe or perhaps prolonged physical and emotional stress, it's almost guaranteed that you will become heterosexual at puberty. Enter epigenetics. Long thought to have some sort of hereditary link, a group of scientists suggested that homosexuality is linked to epimarks, extra layers of information that control how certain genes are expressed. William Rice, an evolutionary biologist at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and lead author of the study, explains that these epimarks are usually, but not always, erased between generations. He theorized that in homosexuals, these epimarks aren't erased. They're passed from father to daughter or mother to son. There is compelling evidence that epimarks contribute to both the dispositional similarity and dissimilarity in family members, and can therefore feasibly contribute to the observed familial inheritance of homosexuality and its low concordance between identical twins. During development, chromosomes are subject to chemical changes that don't affect the nucleotide sequence, but can turn genes on and off. The best known example is methylation, in which a methyl group is attached to a specific DNA region. Such epimarks can remain in place for a lifetime, but most are erased when egg and sperm are produced, so that a fetus starts with a blank slate. Recent studies, however, have shown that some marks are passed to the next generation. Rice and his team created a mathematical model that explains why homosexuality is passed through epimarks, not genetics. Evolutionarily speaking, if homosexuality was solely a genetic trait, scientists would expect the trait to eventually disappear, because homosexuals wouldn't be expected to reproduce. But because these epimarks provide an evolutionary advantage for the parents of homosexuals, they protect fathers of homosexuals from underexposure to testosterone and mothers of homosexuals from overexposure to testosterone while they are in gestation. Rice's model still needs to be tested on real-life parent-offspring pairs, but he says this epigenetic link makes more sense than any other explanation, and that his team has mapped out a way for other scientists to test their work. There are other theories involving epimarks that are indeed caused environmentally. If a child gets small amounts of nourishment while gestating, it will typically not eat a lot after it's born and be small its entire life. If it gets large amounts of food, it will typically eat a lot and be large its entire life. This is in part due to epigenetic reprogramming of how DNA expresses itself to make it more fit for the environment it's being born into. Being gay may just be a postpartum epigenetic reaction to prepubescent environmental conditions. Did the Ireland potato famine actually reorganize DNA? Well, no. But it did affect the epimarks of the current and the next generation. If, during puberty, you find that you're gay, there is nothing wrong with that. If you become a masculine woman or a feminine man, there's nothing wrong with that. Every single species evolves through mutation. If our species evolves to have more nurturing and caring fathers and more aggressive mothers, maybe that will make us evolutionarily more fit to deal with the future. The barbarians of the past would have a very hard time living in today's society. The downside of being gay, of course, is that you can't procreate, so you are the end of your evolutionary line. But a flower with a mutation that sets it apart from all the other flowers tends to be the most beautiful. So while they're here, I think society should take the time to appreciate how awesome they are, and get over any fear of the unknown by talking to them and learning about them. Gender identity. First and foremost, cross-dressers are not necessarily transgender. They're just people who like to wear the clothing that is stereotypical of the opposite sex. That being said, let's continue. In existing law, gender has been synonymous with sex. When gender became disconnected from sex, it became closer to a choice or a dysphoria and no longer had any meaning in legal discussion. If gender is a choice or a psychiatric condition or psychological condition, then gender is not a legal concept. Consider this. Two male children are born, one likes to play with trucks, the other with dolls. Should either have more rights than the other? Obviously not. Should they be treated differently in society? Well, we have differing standards of polite behavior for male-male, male-female, and female-female interactions, so perhaps, yes, they should be treated differently. Should they be afforded non-discriminatory protections? That gets a little bit murky. Gender means masculine, feminine, or neuter. These words are completely arbitrary and subjective, and therefore fluid. But like all stereotypes, have their roots in fact. Should a masculine woman be protected more or less than a feminine woman? How do you make laws to protect a feminine man without discriminating against masculine men? If the law says all men are required to sign up for selective service, does that mean that feminine men are exempt and masculine women aren't? What if a masculine woman identifies as a woman, but the military police think she looks enough like a man to be conscripted? Where is the objective test to enforce the law? There are three pertinent characteristics of human beings being described as transgender: genetic sex, as previously discussed, dispositional attributes, physical but non-sexual attributes. Important. Sexual orientation is not part of the gender identity conversation. The ratio of sexually straight to sexually gay transgenders in relation to their genetic sex is consistent with the ratio of sexually straight to sexually gay non-transgenders. Sexual orientation has nothing to do with transgenderism. Dispositional attributes can be aggressive or timid, outgoing, introspective, nice or mean. Any trait you can use to describe a disposition has a range that society decides what end of the spectrum is masculine and what end is feminine. Any person can have any combination of dispositional attributes. There are very aggressive women and there are very petite men. These attributes have ranges and extremes. When scientists do brain scans, they can show the dispositional attribute of a person by identifying which areas of the brain are most active or enlarged. But disposition has nothing to do with sex. Physical but non-sexual attributes can be muscular, demure, hairy, hairless, rough, fine, handsome, beautiful, whatever. Any person can have any combination of non-sexual physical attributes. There are women with man hands, thank you, Jerry Seinfeld, and men with beautiful faces, bearded women, body bald men. These attributes have ranges and extremes. But non-sexual physical attributes have nothing to do with sex. Many Native American warriors had no body hair, but they certainly weren't women. There are statistical data that show most members of a specific genetic sex seem to conform to a similar range of physical and dispositional attributes. That's where we get the terms masculine and feminine from. These are simply descriptions of stereotypical norms that society has assigned to groups of physical and dispositional characteristics. Most men are more aggressive and more muscular and more hairy than most women. But that is not to say that a genetically male person should be considered female just because they are timid, weak, and hairless. There are many things that contribute to gender dysphoria. Early life trauma can create both gender confusion and even sexual confusion. Let me say right now, I honestly believe with all my heart that the mass majority of gay people being gay is not something that can be fixed. I have no proof of that, but I see how fragile the estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, pituitary gland system is, and I see hermaphrodites, and I have to say to myself that sexual orientation is probably, in most cases, a hormone thing and an epimark thing. However, there are documented cases of sexual trauma causing people to reject their own sex to cope with the trauma. But other non-sexual trauma or environmental attributes could also contribute. This personal trauma may switch some of those DNA epimarks permanently. Society and non-family members typically do not have knowledge of the child's sex and therefore must make a determination based on physical, non-sexual, and dispositional attributes as well as clothing, makeup, hairstyle. If all outward appearances are feminine, then society will treat a person as female and reinforcing the gender dysphoria every day. This constant treatment as if they are the opposite sex along with their own non-sexual physical and dispositional attributes conflicting with stereotypical norms of masculinity and femininity sometimes causes resentment and depression, and to deal with the depression these people cross-dress, wear makeup, thereby assuming the gender identity that they themselves and society has bestowed upon them. Bathrooms and public showers and sports. Transgenderism is a state of mind, and gender dysphoria is a mental condition, similar to depression. Although we do justly make accommodations for people with disabilities, we do not infringe on the physical privacy of others to make such accommodations for them. Transgenders in bathrooms is not a big deal because males using the women's bathroom will use a stall and females using the men's bathroom will also use a stall. In neither case is anyone's privacy violated unless you consider a female walking past 5 guys aiming their penises at a urinal a privacy violation. No one should be at the door asking for your birth certificate. I've heard the argument that parents don't want creepers dressed like women looking at their daughters in the bathroom. The pedophilia rate of transgenders is no greater than that in the general society. And pedophiles are attracted to young children, not one sex or the other. If you stop them from entering the woman's bathroom with your daughter, they will be in the men's room with your son, posing the same danger. It doesn't help anything. However, even though I'm pretty sure there aren't many transgenders who actually want to use a community open stall shower, transgenders should not be allowed into the public showers of the opposite sex. However, if you are transsexual and you've had the surgery, then it's completely... You've changed your genital makeup, your genital appearance, then it's completely fine for you to go into the other shower because, right or wrong, you have shown a commitment, my friend. Sports, on the other hand, gets murky. If a female transgender wants to compete in male sports, that's totally fine as long as she's not taking performance-enhancing steroids like testosterone, since steroids are performance-enhancing drugs and there are rules against such things in sports. Transgenders should not qualify for the medical prescription exemption. Males competing on female teams get murky for the exact same reason, but in reverse. If the males are not taking enough estrogen, they might have an unfair advantage because their natural hormone levels. If a trained male weightlifter or runner or gymnast or soccer player decides to compete on the female team, he is likely to win. Of course, it's not guaranteed, but he does have a genetic advantage. If gender is fluid, how does this affect selective service? Can a male decide his gender is female until he is no longer able to be drafted? Considering gays can legally marry, there is no legal downside from claiming that you are female, than marrying your girlfriend and simply saying that you're a gay transgender female who cross-dresses as a male. Conclusion. Even if transgenderism was completely genetic, if a transgender person was born on a desert island with no males or females to compare against, maybe robots raised them, they would grow up feeling completely normal. If they like to play with dolls or trucks or toys or easy-bake ovens, that's just who they would be. It would never cross their minds that their appearance or their disposition didn't match their sexual organs, because there would be no social norms or stereotypes telling them what masculine or feminine was. Scientific studies of the brain simply tell us that a person can have specific dispositions that overlap the non-stereotypical range of masculine-feminine scale for that specific attribute. But remember, masculine and feminine are social constructs and are not objective nor scientific. Male and female are genetic. The amount of hormones being produced and the way the brain, with all its experimental baggage, reacts to those hormones is both genetic and environmental, both nature and nurture. Men and women have a range of non-sexual physical and dispositional attributes, none of which are male or female. Women can have small hips, men can have big pouty lips, women can have stinky feet, and men can have model hands. Women can have huge biceps and men can have long hairless legs. Apart from your reproductive organs, your uterus, your ovaries, your vagina, your penis, your testicles, tubes of various sorts, absolutely no physical or dispositional thing about you is scientifically male or female. Of course, statistically, men are larger and women are smaller. There are literally 2,000 times more men over 6 feet than women, but only 30 times as many men over 5'10" than women. And nearly everyone, male and female, is over 5 feet. So does your height make you more male or more female? No, it's just statistics. Men are statistically stronger, women statistically have larger pelvic girdles, but none of those features make you a man or a woman. Cross-dressers are in a category of their own. These are people who have absolutely no problem with their gender identity. They simply like wearing the clothes stereotypical of the opposite sex. Transgender people are born perfectly normal, just the way they are. In some cases, a person's sexual organs develop unusually, causing disposition and non-sexual physical characteristics outside the range society expects for that person's sex. In some cases, stress or trauma. In other cases, social factors influence how the brain reacts to normal amounts of hormones being produced. Once again, causing disposition characteristics outside the range society expects for a person's sex. Once the person recognizes where they put themselves into the societal stereotypes of masculine and feminine, and recognize that people within their environment also place them into one category or the other, if that category is contrary to their sex, then one psychological result might be depression or dysphoria. Dysphoria and other distressing emotional upsets should be treated with therapy. Unfortunately, in today's society, pointing out that they may be depressed and might benefit from psychiatric help is regarded as transphobic. And so the cycle continues, and the transgender population suicide rate remains near 40%. Please click the subscribe button to see more videos like this. If you disagree with me, please leave a comment. My ears are always open, and I learn new things every day when people disagree with me. I'm Tom Graham. I'll see you next time on The Hard Answers.